All right, hell yeah. So there's a few moments in this project that I would like to mention. You know what I mean? I have bipolar and bipolar mania. What is that? Schizoaffective disorder? But hell yeah. Not that that has anything to do with anything, but sometimes, you know what I mean? I think in life we all want to get out, like one of the, I don't know what the hell I'm saying, but if you get out of the way, hell yeah. You know what I mean? Something cool might happen. And so this is just kind of one of those moments, a lot of things, but yeah, finding just the perfect amount of bike boxes in a full dumpster, that was pretty sweet. At the moment I wanted to do this project, went back for more. They emptied it, but we're good for now. But hell yeah, just taking this bike box and putting the hinge right here. Hell yeah. And we're getting a lot of structure out of this. So I'm going to do this one on this side and then an additional bike box on there, overlap them. I found that that's a good way to get some structure. And then we may even foam out, you know what I mean? I really want this to be pretty solid. So at least we'll have half the boat done where it's just like I can lean out onto this corner. And so, yeah, I'm excited about that. I have no idea after I put that thing on and even shave it down, if I can get this thing out a door. So that's the thing that I'm really worried about, you know what I mean? Because I do have to switch to the garage at some point. It's just nice to work in the house. So hell yeah. Anyway, this was a pointless video. But now it's just like when things come together, you're just like, hell yeah, just that crease. And then I'm even going to put a nice little flare on this, just a little bit. So we'll tape it up. Let's do it. Booyah. All right, hell yeah. So I cut another bike box and I was just like, well, why don't we just use an entire bike box to cover it? But with these bike boxes, you do have that seam right there. And so that's two seams that are pretty weak together. So I'm still going to go back to just overlapping two sections because this section does have a crease in it, but it is the full width of the side of that bike box. All right, hell yeah. All right, hell yeah. So things are going pretty good. We got the two bike boxes, two panels, and we put them together so we have that side completely done. And we put a nice taper into it, and we're even going to, even kind of taper it more. And so, hell yeah, that's going to be tapered out to there. And then out here, I think you can kind of see that taper to the outside. And then I wanted to turn on the camera because if you have this low volume front and then even like a vacated area here, I just didn't think you needed volume right here. Even if you tagged a wave with these and water came into the boat, you could actually use that to sub. So it would be a combination of like punch, stab, and surf. What do they call that? Skip. So you could either... I don't know why I'm hung up on terminology, but hell yeah, you could either skip through or, you know what I mean? I think you would maybe want water to come in right there through the floor. The other aspect of that is then, that's why I turn on the camera, when you have two of these and then you push down on them or, pull down on them to climb back in the boat, you can almost have, because this only really needs to be like 6 inches there to 2 inches there, just as the sharp point. And it's so rockered that it shouldn't get in the way, right? Because if you actually do pile water onto that bow, like you got other issues, you know what I mean? And then you could, anyway, so hell yeah. So if you did pull down on those two bow ends, because if I do double them up, then you might be able to just crest your chest up onto that surface and then just kind of worm your way back into the boat. So that's it. So it'd just be another way to climb back in. I've always thought about that. And then the other element that's happening is that I'm getting these tall surfaces that are angled. You know what I mean? So if I do have an angle, I've always wanted to try like a 60 degree, probably 70 or 80. But, if you could get some sort of angle out here, then when you put this boat onto that angle, it might not tip over. Good luck with that. But there's a chance. That would kind of act like a sponson, especially if you have this angle and then you just have a little bit more foam here. Essentially you're just making like that 60 degree angle. You put it on a 60 degree, hell yeah, you might be able to throw your, do your low side, what do they call it? Just your high brace. You have a high brace and a low brace. So R1 and C1 kayaking really emphasizes the low brace. but who cares about that? But then the other element from an R1 design is I climbing in the middle of the boat. I just think needs to be easier, especially in class 5 environments. It just has to be like, okay, I'm out, I'm in. You know what I mean? Like almost like, hey, if I'm holding on to the boat, it takes half the effort to pull in, because that's the crazy thing is like currently in all rafting, it's taking peak effort, especially if you've fallen out in a substantial rapid. You're already gassed. You know what I mean? You have to have that in your mindset that the second you fall out, you're gassed. And so to really make the pull-in process easier. So I was thinking no more than 12-inch height. And that's all we need. You know what I mean? All I need is the minimum is 12 inches to where I actually put my feet down and where I sit, even in my boat, because we have that 18-inch tube and then the 6-inch floor. That's just 12 inches there. And so I thought you could even reduce that. So let's say this is 10 inches or 12 inches. I thought you could even do like, you know, like almost crazy low. You know what I mean? Let's just say a number. Let's pick 8. So let's say this was 8 inches and it was the width of your torso, and then it would flute up high. But in that little pocket, all you'd have to do then is pull yourself over that. You know what I mean? Which is probably, you know, like no more than pulling yourself over a spud. You know what I mean? So that would be the minimum is you have like kind of like a spud tube. And the wild thing about it is like, hey, if it's all the way wide through there, then it's not a big deal to sit on that. You know what I mean? So that was what I was thinking. I was like, well, we are all sitting back here, but yeah, there is. I'm sitting in the middle plenty, but it's just, you know, do I want to give that up? Do I want to give sitting right here, shifting to the middle, and just either getting real low? You know what I mean? Because the other element of that is I do want to be real low in here anyway, and then almost have something to brace up against. So even another fluted surface here. So maybe a stack height of 8 inches, but then, you know, however, you know, there's a lot of options here. But I've just noticed that if you're going to plug a hole, you definitely want your body into that corner, and it would make sense to have it far into that corner. And so now that we don't have inflated tubes, we can carve out whatever we want out of that corner. And it should do two things. It should allow us to climb back in easier, and then also find a pocket that's not too ridiculously small or close to the ground. But no, this is making more and more sense. From an R1, you're sitting back here, and you're like, uh-oh, we're going sideways into a hole. You know, like currently, probably the best option is just drop to the center. But this essentially gives you the option to drop to this center corner. You know what I mean? So I'll call it a center corner. And that just makes sense. Like I would, you know, because I what happens to me is I high side so hard as a detriment, and I just fly out because I have nothing to hook my body in. There's no hook on my feet. And so like, but I'm hesitant to just drop right here because I feel like I'm going to give up performance. You know what I mean? Like I know what I want my boat to do edgewise, and I just feel like this is a giving up location, even though that currently I need to do that more. You know, that's what I was kind of working on at the lake, is be here, high side, drop here, but then lean over that edge. And so if I just have a pocket, then I'm doing two things. I'm already edged into that corner. Hopefully that's enough hip pocket, then I'm not getting thrown out. And and it puts me lowest into the boat. I should be able to brace from that position, and it'd just be cool to hold. And because that's the other element is like right there, I actually want it to get onto an extreme angle, you know, so I can even have the most flute right here of this outside wall. You know, because I want to go into that pocket and then just really flare out this boat, especially in a hole. And if it's just right there, especially on that pivot point, then I think you can whip it around and then go straight surf. Because that's what is happening in holes is you're getting locked in so hard to a straight surf, or locked in a hole sideways. And then these corners are just screwing you over into a flip. So it's either like you're surfing or you're flipping. But if you have these corners free, then those aren't getting in the way anymore. And now you have more freedom to kind of bounce the boat in, and hopefully it bounces right on this rib, because that's the idea is like, hey, you're locked into this corner, you're in a nasty hole, And this can be just even surfable holes, like Hungry Mother on the Golly. You know what I mean? The second I fill up with water, my boat dynamics goes out the window, and then it's just in that whoop, flip or surf, where it's like now you're not controlling the boat. You know what I mean? And so eliminating the water situation in a hole, that's another animal, it's a beast to reduce the water that comes in. It's almost like, compared to C1 kayaking, we are OC1 kayaking. Water fills in and our boat is just subject to all that water. Hell yeah. So even in Hungry Mother, now you're into that corner, you're really able to, like angle the boat. And even in Hungry Mother, like it's almost impossible to turn back, just easily back to a straight surf. And that's what's going to happen in surfs in holes that you want to get out of. Let's say you're in Hungry Mother on the Upper Golly and you want to get out. Like I want to get out now, just to treat it like a hole that you want to get out of. Well, then what are you going to do? I got a couple techniques. One is actually just kind of more leaning onto that tube and freeing the water. And now I remember what I was going to say, is that the idea is like, can you get this way into that hole? Because the second you can get this way into that hole, you can use that forward upstream momentum to ricochet out, or just build up a lot of steam in, and then that equal and opposite force kicks you out. But the only way that you're going to be able to turn that way is if that's kind of like a pivot point right there. You know what I mean? So it's maybe bumped out just a little bit. And hell yeah. But that's the thing, from this profile, I really don't want too much bumped out down here. But I could, because I could have a bump out here. This could be the widest section and still not get in front of, not get in the way of paddling. Because paddling, I want this to be a curve, and I want the diamond-shaped boat, especially off the back, even though this is the bow. But what I have found is that, so this will work, because what I found is that if I'm paddling and my paddle runs into some sort of sponson back here, hell no. And so in our design, we're removing this corner, and we have the option, sure, to boost out, put a little sponson right there. So when you do go for that, and then, when you take a paddle stroke, I have found that sweeping it underneath the rug, pulling forward, we all do kind of drawing strokes in R1. You know what I mean? You're sitting here, and it's easiest to go that way because you can just pull the boat in that direction. It's almost really hard to paddle forward, do a forward stroke. Your boat's going to turn that way, and then to keep the momentum going that way. That's really hard to turn the boat this way without it just washing out. Turn the boat and keep that momentum. All right, so hell yeah. And so this video started with just the fact that you could pull down on this and climb in. I almost think of this as like a rescue boat, where if you were able to pull down on that portion of the raft and it was at water level, hell yeah. And it would even kind of catapult you back in maybe. And because that's what it would do is if you pull that down, this will pop up and now you're just in the boat. Where currently, even in my raft, it's only about 12 to 14 inches, but you pull down on that and it's too much to climb over still. You know what I mean? And so that is, what do they call that? Not taking advantage of stuff. It's like that is, anyway, we use whatever adjectives. But if this was a foolproof, I hate using words I don't know. But anyway, if this worked, that would be fucking awesome. All right, so hell yeah. Thanks for joining me. Booyah.